So I think we're going to start. It's 7:02 and we have an exciting program, so I would like to get underway. If everybody will please mute their audio, but leave up your video, we will get started. I'd like to welcome you to our first program of 2023. The timing is appropriate because the legislature just started. And among our advocacy initiatives, certainly, in addition to being in the courts and challenging the abortion bans, which we are still doing, by the way, we are in the legislature and we are very involved, actively involved in monitoring bills, testifying against or for bills. The last few years it's been mostly against, but nevertheless, we take an active stand. And tonight we're going to talk about what is happening in this legislature. Strange mix, I would say, with the new administration and yet still a Republican-controlled legislature. So we will see how much is accomplished or whether it's going to be a lot of gamesmanship. I will say that this session, we were just talking about this before everyone came onto camera, is very interesting because one of the first bills, if not the first bill that was dropped by Senator Kavanaugh, SB 1001, is a bill that makes it illegal for teachers and school employees to respect the pronouns of trans or non-binary students. There are also several bills that were introduced that had to do with drag shows. So we look at that in the context of the shortcomings this state faces with public education, with attempts to, again, minimize taxation for wealthy corporations and businesses and taxpayers against all the issues that we are facing. So we're going to explore tonight, what do they have up their sleeve? But along with our advocacy, as I said, we've also been in the courts, and one of the initiatives we are extremely proud of is that last year, we filed an amicus brief in a case of a mother who lost custody of her child because she was taking medically prescribed cannabis. And the lawyer in that case, Julie Gunnigal, is on our board at NCJW. Along with, I'd like to introduce, we have present our advocacy task force team. Julie is on that team, Anita Malik, and Megan Kramer. We also have our lobbyist and our political advisor, Jody Liggett, who guides us through the legislative maze, who will let everybody know what you can do to support and oppose various bills that come up for hearing. So first, I'd like to let Julie tell you about the win we had, because particularly in last year's climate, it's very important.
Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction. It's so incredible to be part of a group that not just is down there at the legislature engaging in that kind of advocacy, but is in the courts and can credibly say, we are going to sue you, and then follow through on that promise. And one of the things that NCJW Arizona did was sign on to an amicus brief. And for those who tuned into programs like this, a year and a half ago, we did an incredible program with Lynn Paltrow from National Advocates for Pregnant Women, now Pregnancy Justice Center, and Deborah Small from Breaking the Chains, about the intersection of custody, the criminalization of pregnancy, and the erosion of reproductive freedoms in our state and states all across the country. One of the amazing wins that we had this week, and I will be so brief because I'm so excited for this panel, but you need to know, for those of you who tuned on in and saw Lindsay Ridgel, who was a mama who had extreme nausea during pregnancy, it's called hyperemesis gravidarum, results in about 1 in 3 pregnancies ending in miscarriage. And when pharmaceuticals wouldn't touch any of her symptoms, her doctor recommended cannabis. When her healthy baby was born, the Department of Child Safety placed her on the Central Neglect Registry for 25 years, making her virtually unemployable. That healthy baby is now 4 years old, just had a birthday a few months ago, and just 5 days ago, we found out that the appeal was successful. The Arizona Supreme Court said that they are not going to touch what happened in the Court of Appeals, and what happened in the Court of Appeals was an unbridled win for every person who deserves full medical autonomy during pregnancy without state intervention. And I cannot be more thankful to NCJW Arizona for being partners in this fight. It was powerful having you, having national advocates, having Drug Policy Alliance, having nearly every perinatal neonatologist in our state sign on to that brief. And then in addition, Amy Schumer joined the cause as well, because she's been directly impacted by this. So again, a big win for us, a big win for pregnant people all around Arizona, and thought you ought to know about it.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for representing that mother. We are very proud of that win, just as we are very proud of the fetal personhood law that we managed to get an injunction on, and we're still fighting that in the courts, and we are still fighting for a second injunction on the reason ban to prevent termination for reason of genetic anomaly. We had won the injunction, as most of you know, and after the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court overturned our injunction. So we refiled another motion, and we are still waiting to hear from the judge, and we may indeed file for a summary judgment. So we're active there. But now we are moving into the full legislative session here. And for that, we're thrilled that we have Bram Resnick with us, but I am going to let Jody, who again is our lobbyist and our political and policy consultant, take the lead here in talking about what we are facing with the legislature and introduce Bram. So Jody.
All right, can everybody hear me and see what I just put up? Super, okay, thank you so much. I am going to move super quick, just through the things that are coming up next week. This session is just starting fast and furious. We heard the governor's state of the state. We've seen her budget at a high level. There's a lot to like in both of those messages. And now we've got our legislature with their hands in the mix. And as Sylvia mentioned, really interesting bills already that we're seeing. Kavanaugh has just been on fire. He was at the front of the line, apparently. So you'll see a lot of his bills scheduled. The highlighted positions I have, and I'll put it in the chat, or we can send this out. Super high level view of bills that are coming up and our initial thought. There's several of these that we're neutral on. Doesn't mean they're good or bad, means we need more information before we could really recommend a position. So Wednesday, I mean, we've already started, but coming up are some, pretty benign bills, but also Kavanaugh is just on fire. So, for instance, making municipal elections partisan. I think we've all had so much partisanship lately that we can imagine that is not a best practice. And someone who has served in both city and state governments, I can tell you it's very refreshing to have a nonpartisan environment. So I would say, initial recommendation on opposing that, requiring the AG to defend laws. That's the AG's discretion. That's really the legislature reaching over into another branch. Mr. Biasucci wants to ban cities from charging sales tax on food. Food taxes are regressive. They're also just one tool in a toolbox that our cities, don't have a lot of means to raise revenue, and they're supposed to be a thing called local control. So I'm sure the cities will tell us, all there is specifically not to like about that, but as a policy, I think it's probably flawed. We had a judiciary committee that's been canceled. In military affairs, again, Kavanaugh all over the place, wants to ban people from soliciting donations, panhandling. Basically, there are all sorts of safety reasons to do things around that, but this is in particular is criminalizing homelessness, similarly banning sleeping, sitting on sidewalks. There's already a court case on this. The Supreme Court has spoken through their inaction. I think Kavanaugh is, trying to relitigate that issue. Of course, we're all very concerned on some of Mr. Horn's messaging, our new superintendent, and Senator Kavanaugh's ideas around what are good uses of our time at the legislature in terms of education, telling teachers what they can and can't do, telling students what they may or may not be called, getting rid of speech zones on college campuses, which the conversation you can have, there's some safety questions. Again, these are not new ideas. And I would skip ahead to the Judiciary Committee on Thursday. We were protecting statues, just all sorts of stuff. There's some safety issues with residential picketing, but this Senate Bill 1023 that we're looking at is really overbroad. So we'll be keeping an eye on these. Again, you've got a very, very busy legislature. Unfortunately, they seem to be focusing, not on what most of us would consider our top 10, which are fixing our education system, number one, I think looking at health and safety issues and having to have a safety net. So that's what we're looking at so far. I would like to introduce you to our guest who can talk about these things specifically, but I think more generally, the atmosphere since this historic election we've had, divided government, and just giving us the benefit of his perspective after many, many years of Capitol watching and reporting. So you all know that Bram Resnick is a 12 News anchor and reporter, and he hosts Sunday Square Off, our favorite show. He has more than 25 years of journalism experience in television and newspapers. His reporting includes extensive coverage of the Arizona Capitol, immigration, the state economy and business community, Arizona sports industry, and other topics. He's a native of Montreal. He has a master's degree in journalism from Northwestern and a bachelor's in English and history from McGill. We knew you were an English major. We knew you were special, Bram. Other ways which Bram is special, his wife, Wendy, is a children's librarian at Phoenix Libraries, and they live in Tempe with their 2 boys. Welcome, Bram. Thank you so much for being with us. Tell us what you think.
Thank you, Jody. Well, what I think is I wrote that bio 15 years ago because I've been in journalism for 40 years now, and we don't live in Tempe anymore. So lots changed, but my wife is still a children's librarian. She's the star of the family. She gets people to read. I get them to watch TV. So we're kind of covered there. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoy talking to groups like this. And what I enjoy most, frankly, are your questions, because I know you're a pretty smart group and you've got a lot of good questions. So I'm happy to take those. I'll keep my remarks short. And since you want me to talk about the legislature, I'll just give you these kind of 3 things to know right now. And the first I just picked up today, it's pretty obvious now that we're 3 days into the session. 3 days? No, actually just 2 days. I guess it feels like 3 days, doesn't it? Wait, hang on. What's the date? No, we're a week into the session. Oh my goodness. I'll be candid. COVID has totally messed up my ability to peg dates. It's really frightening sometimes. I ask for the wrong vacation days. My wife's going to kill me. Anyhow, a couple things to keep in mind. So today there was a hearing on the governor's budget. The joint budget committees in the House and the Senate got together and they grilled the governor's budget director. And at one point, David Livingston, he's a senator now, right? There's so many new ones. They move all around. Livingston is chair of the Senate committee says to the budget director, you know what? Katie Hobbs does not have a mandate. She does not have a mandate to do anything. So you listen to us, lady. He didn't say that, but that was kind of the tone of it. Is trying to establish their co-equals here, kind of like when Russell Pierce, the late Russell Pierce, was buried yesterday, said he was a co-governor. It doesn't work like that, and he'll find out. And here's the one word you should keep in mind if it's not there already. It's a 4-letter word, and the word is veto. We're talking about all these bills targeting drag performers, drag shows, transgender students, people who panhandle, you name it. But in the end, as governor, the most powerful tool Katie Hobbs has is the veto. And she will use it. She's been advised by Janet Napolitano, the state's last Democratic governor, who used her veto, issued more than 150 vetoes. When I interviewed her, she knew the exact number. More than 150 vetoes. She dealt with a Republican legislature which had a much larger majority. But if you remember her, and very, very gifted governor, and she kind of mastered the Republicans and knew how to cut deals. And some would say maybe cut too many deals, maybe too many favoring Republicans, but she got some things done. And that is the model for Katie Hobbs right now. They're different people. They've talked about this, how to govern. And so I think you just have to know the veto awaits. The Republicans know the veto awaits. And so I think we're going to see at the start now, it's kind of a testing period. Speaker Ben Toma said as much on opening day. You know, they'll send some bills up, see what she'll veto, she'll see what she won't, see where they want to fight, see where they don't, and go from there. They have no way around the veto. I'll point out what we saw during Napolitano's terms. Napolitano's terms were also lawsuits. The legislature sued her over her vetoes and won some of those fights. So don't be surprised if we see that as well. So you're going to see that testing period. I think what's most interesting right now is lurking out there, and I'm sure this group's aware of it, is the aggregate spending limit for schools, the spending cap. After March 1st, they can't spend money more than $1 billion, K-12 public schools, that the legislature gave them last year. It's in their budget, but because of this archaic 1980 era spending cap, they can't spend it without the legislature's permission. And Katie Hobbs, when I had her on Square Off, said she's making plans for a special session on the opening day of the legislature. Ben Toma said, oh, we don't need that. We'll get this done. And yet the formal message and response to the governor's speech given by Leo Biasucci and Sonny Borelli was basically, yeah, we'll see. They're in no hurry to get anything done with the AEL, so I would not be surprised to see a special session there when she could just put one thing in front of them and they'd have to vote on it or not. And Jody, you might have more insight into this than I do, but I'm told they could adjourn if they want to. They could just, gavel in and gavel out and not do anything. But that's the bigger picture here, right? With this legislation we're talking about, with the posture Republicans are taking. And as an aside, if you haven't talked about this, this is without a doubt the farthest right Republican caucus I've ever covered. And it's not even close. Election deniers, QAnon people, some pretty sketchy dudes. They are far to the right. And so the question is how far they're going to go, what they think they can get out of this, and whether they'll be punished for it in 2024, and whether they're going to be kind of creating a Republican brand in that legislature that is going to be even more toxic to voters than the brand of some of the statewide candidates we saw. So that's what's going on here. On the other side, the question for Katie Hobbs is, I don't know if any of you speak Yiddish, but my parents spoke Yiddish. I grew up in a Yiddish speaking household, by the way. My parents always communicated in Yiddish. And my father, who had a business, when he talked business, he always communicated in Yiddish because he didn't want anybody to know what he was talking about. But we knew some stuff. And he always described his accountant as having sitzfleisch. Basically, a butt he could sit on for a long, long time. And that's what she's going to have to do with some of these bills. Just show the patience to sit there and say no and take whatever heat might come. I think it was very telling. I think she knew what she was doing. In the first line in her budget is kill the voucher program. That's the slideshow. Kill the vouchers. Oh, okay. Now, you can't do that, right? But she really kind of held out that red cape there in front of Republicans, and we saw the reaction to that today at that hearing I mentioned. So the question is, will Katie Hobb use her veto stamp? By the way, she has Janet Napolitano's actual veto stamp. Will she use it? She will. How many times? How effectively? And can they cut a deal here? All the legislature, their one job, you had one job to do. Their one job is passing a budget. None of this other stuff really matters. Now, they do have to do something about water. They do have to do something about the AEL and other things. But basically, they got to pass a budget. So we may, by July 1st, we may be here past July 1st. They may be there past July 1st to pass a budget. We just don't know how this is going to play out and just how much stamina they have on the far right to keep pushing the stuff they're pushing all the way up to the governor's office. And lastly, I would just say, don't forget, the Republicans have just a one vote majority in both chambers. We keep talking about Republican control. As I said, Janet Napolitano was dealing truly with a Republican controlled legislature. All Katie Hobbs would need to do is peel off 2 votes in each chamber. I would add, two newly elected Republicans have claimed they're not going to do anything until Kari Lake is governor. So sure, great. Let the Democrats, have their way. That'll show them. They haven't stepped back from that. I have to believe they're not going to do that. Don't think they will. So are there 2 votes in each chamber that the governor could peel off to get what she wants? Because I could tell you there are certainly at least 2 Republicans in each chamber who don't go along with what some of these other folks want. And so you could see that. That's all she needs. Just 2 to stand up in each chamber. So that's also something to watch for. As for the rest of these bills, they'll make good show. Sadly for the media, they may get some national attention. But in the end, what's so different this time, for the first time in 15 years, you can just look at a bill and say, that's going nowhere. Or you can look at, I should say, most of the bills. You always know certain bills aren't going anywhere. But you can look at most of these bills and say, dead, 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 veto, veto, veto. So that's something to keep in mind. A lot of this is performance, more so than usual at the Capitol. But the real stuff that matters, like AEL, like the budget, like water, like fentanyl, I think you might see some coming together there. So that's the Capitol. I can talk a little bit more if you'd like about other issues that I know people are really interested in. Everybody loves Kyrsten Sinema for some reason. I don't know. Just love talking about Kyrsten Sinema. That's probably that's going to be very soon the most interesting story, one of the most interesting political stories in the country. And I don't think any of you were surprised when she announced she was independent. Certainly I wasn't. I've known her 15 plus years. She's always been a party of one. And so a lot of us thought she was going to announce she was independent right after she won in 2018, because she's always been her own party, does her own thing. She is the shrewdest politician in the state. I will say she may have outwitted herself on some very basic political practice. You can call it malpractice. Look at the legislative achievements. They're truly impressive. Joe Biden couldn't have gotten anything done without her. On the other hand, just basic politics, retail politics, she does things that are just stupid. I mean, she does them. She's her own person, but politically, just not too smart. You know, you may want to do what you want, but once you start offending voters, they don't forget that. They really don't. And that's an issue for her. However, she's independent. She will keep doing her own thing, try to cut deals with the House that makes it more difficult. But she does have a lot of achievements already on her belt. And the question will be what happens when Ruben Gallego, who sure appears like he's going to announce he's running for the US Senate, what happens then? It's the stare down, I think. Who, you know, well, not just what happens then, but what do Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden do? And can you really have a Senate race in Arizona without a Democrat on the ballot? Democrat, Independent, Republican? And who's the Republican going to be? I was just reading a story, I think in Axios before we came in, that suddenly it's cool to be a moderate Republican again. And Mitch Daniels is running. And that made me think one of his biggest fans, Doug Ducey, might decide, hey, I can run for the Senate now. Coast clear. We'll see about that, because the question is how much lasting staying power does Donald Trump have? A year from now, the world's going to look a lot different. Can't say how, but it's going to look a lot different. And I think a lot of that will likely have to do with Trump. Does he have the staying power? Will he enter 2024 as the favorite among Republican presidential candidates, if he is still a candidate? I don't know about that. You're starting to see the tugging away, because remember, the only thing that makes people run from another candidate or higher up is they lost. That's the only reason people are running away from Donald Trump. He lost. You can do anything else, just don't lose. He lost, cost them seats. That's bad. That's the sin, the ultimate sin in politics. And so he's on the outs. It's inconceivable that Mitch McConnell would let a Blake Masters type run again for the Senate in 2024. But you never know. Certainly not a Carrie Lake. And you know, this is somebody who I think she needs a job. I don't know where that job is, but she's not going to be. She thinks she's the real governor, but this is just nonsense. Just nonsense. That all could flame out by the end of this year. One thing to watch locally: in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, the Republican Party is going to pick their new chair. Kelly Ward's not running. The favorite candidate is Jeff DeWitt. You might remember him as treasurer. He also worked high up in the Trump campaign organization. He was the chief operating officer, chief financial officer. He watched the money, basically. Well, you didn't really see him out there in insurrection planning, certainly, but even some of the worst excesses of that administration. But he's likely to be the new chair of the party, which could bring a different tone. He's supported by Carrie Lake and Wendy Rogers and Mark Fincham. But again, I think what he's counting on is kind of time doing its work and Trump just petering out and perhaps not having the money, not being able to raise the money to truly mount an effective presidential campaign. Where else will the pendulum swing? Trump. I'll stop there. Let's take some questions.
I saw in the chat, Bram, people are curious what you think about water. I know it's a huge topic, you know, but the on fire portion of this, I know we talked about Fountain Hills, but, you know, maybe how you think the players are going to line up and little crystal ball.
I don't think I have a crystal ball. What I do know or understand is this is such a complex problem. It's not something you could say, aha, solved. And you're also talking about bringing people together at the federal level, say California and Arizona, at the state level, rural, urban, and even beyond that, ag interests, development interests. These are some of those powerful lobbyists in the state, and they have allies in the legislature. And wow, you know, it's funny because for years on Square Off, I do the water show. because I never believed what anybody said about water from the day I moved here 20 years ago. And I'm just waiting for the day. Oh, it's okay. And now it's not okay. And this year will be a wake-up call. The feds are likely to order us, I think, they were supposed to do it last year, but oh, no, this is the year, they tell us. So likely to order Arizona to make huge cuts in its water allotment from the Colorado River. That will hurt ag in particular. The ag industry depends on that. And how will that be dealt with? This groundwater issue, I mean, already you have powerful developers and players. And just to, I don't know how much attention you've been paying to it, but this issue we're talking about involving a state law requiring developers to show they have an assured 100-year supply of water before they can develop. That's a really big one because it affects development all over the state. Pinal County, areas of Pinal County already are in violation of that law, and new development can't be permitted. This new development out in Buckeye, and Buckeye, if you don't know it, the area of Buckeye is larger than Phoenix. It's not populated, but physically it's larger geographically. Some major players, not just Bill Gates, but people like Jerry Colangelo. They have a development that wants to put, I think, 300,000 people out there. And right now, they don't have the water for it. How's that going to happen? So you have a lot of deal making going on. It's kind of back to the Wild West, where you'll have cities, developers, water suppliers, cutting deals. You'll have what's going on with the Colorado and negotiations between California and Colorado and Utah and Arizona going on. It's just, I mean, it makes your head hurt. And it's a wonder the state got what they did, got the agreements they got back in 1980. We were a much smaller place. It was still really hard. So just imagine today, a state of 7 million people, Maricopa, 5 million people. It's, wow, it makes your head hurt. And yet it has to get done. And if, on a personal level, I empathize with the Rio Verde residents. On a larger level, these kinds of wake-up calls are good things. It makes it real, right? Every time I do these shows, I'd say, well, my shower worked this morning, so I guess we don't have to worry about anything. But when real stuff begins to happen, suddenly it gets real and it's a reminder. It's kind of hard to penetrate, right? Because my shower still worked this morning. But this is where you really need some serious leadership and bipartisan leadership. And it's going to be tough. And just to round off the discussion, and it's hard again, because I've been saying it's not just one thing. We've been talking, I had a discussion with some water experts, including the woman who helped write, you probably know Kathy Ferris, Jody. She helped write the groundwater law 43 years ago. She's done everything in water, and man, this is hard. And I asked her colleague, Sarah Porter, to start. I said, explain to our viewers how this is different from the Colorado River. Because most folks barely pay attention. And I know that, I get it. They're just doing their thing. That's fine. But people need to know it really has nothing to do with the Colorado River on a really basic level. It's about the water underground, not the water in the river. So it's at least two problems. And then it's even more than that. Wow, I know that's a lot. And maybe we just start with baby steps here. The desalination plant, I'll end it this way. Desalination plant, don't hold your breath waiting for that. I don't hear anybody in water who says that's a solution or that that's even going to happen. But that's water.
Bram, on water, we have the same dynamics that I think extend to so many other issue areas. You've mentioned, right, we can look back to the Napolitano era for, some lessons on divided government. It is really different now. You have Republicans who are used to total control, right? Having the legislature and the governor And you have Democrats who, the vast majority of whom have, been out of power, who don't know what it is like or even what it means, or they're smart people, but they haven't done it before, actually govern. So some of the things that happened in the past, like the Mushroom Coalition, Republican moderates that joined together, it feels like we don't have those same chess pieces on the board now. How do you think these people are going to learn to compromise when they've never, ever, ever had to?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there are 3 of the 90 members of the legislature were actually around 15 years ago, the last time we had divided government like this. That's a long time, isn't it? 41 of the 90 are brand new. So it's even worse than what you described, right? You have all these brand new people, many of them on the far right, trying to make a name. I don't think they're too interested in compromise. But in the end, they'll learn some lessons, right? They'll learn what a veto is. And it was interesting listening to David Livingston today. He's in denial, okay? Nice man, but he's in denial about this. You lost. Whether you lost by 2 votes, 2,000 votes, you lost. That's the end of the game. She's got the veto, not your guy. So they're going to learn some hard lessons, and it might take some repetition. I think there are at least 2 in the Senate who might peel off on some things, maybe 2 in the House who might peel off. But nobody's done this before. Who knows? Ken Bennett, remember Ken Bennett? He was there back in 2008. He was there. He knows how it's done. He might prove to be a voice of reason. We'll see. So there's hope. And in the end, they've got to show they can get something done, I think. Unless you just want to burn the place down. But you got to get something done. You have to fund government, don't you? You're right. Whole different era, different breed of cat. And also, don't forget Arizona in the 2000s. Okay, this is kind of my marker. So at the polls in 2022, Arizona voters, by a decent margin, approved letting undocumented immigrants get in-state tuition at our colleges. That repealed part of a 2006 vote. Remember that vote in 2006? Another ballot initiative. Arizonans voted, I think it was 75-25, to deny undocumented immigrants any state benefits. So in a small way, that tells you a lot. We've come a long way here.
Yeah.
This is a different state, 1 million more people, 1.5 million more people than we had back then. So there's that too. It's different in more ways than just, the 90 folks in that building up the street.
I'm looking for questions. People were curious about back on water, but I think this is a good question generally, because you've seen Navajo and Hopi, right, with the loss of coal, undergoing really dramatic economic changes on reservation, but also it seems to me being much more active at the legislature. Do you see them playing a leadership role in water or other issues? Do you think the tribes will be more visible and active than they've been in the past?
I don't get too far out on this because I haven't done much reporting on it, but I think the reporting to date shows the tribes know they're in a good position and they're needed in this case at the table, and they know it. And so, yeah, I think they're going to play a larger role. They have a lot at stake for their, tribal members, but it could, if they play their hands well, they could come out of this looking pretty good.
Similarly, we're getting some of the same questions. We've talked about moderates and, you know, the lack of any true moderates in the traditional sense. But in terms of, I think this relates most to, we talked about ESAs and, you know, the governor's idea kind of being a non-starter. The thing's gonna bleed money at a certain point, right? I mean, this is, free stuff is popular. Do you, again, we don't have crystal balls. This is just such a new scenario, but how do you kind of see that playing out? I mean, the meter's going to be running, whether it's within this legislative session or, you know, it starts to do damage, fiscal damage. It's not all fuels maybe, but it could be.
Well,
Right?
you may have
So do we
seen
have
this.
to wait for a disaster, or can people like do math and understand that it's a disaster in the making?
You bring up the alt fuels fiasco of the early 2000s under Governor Jane Hall, Propane Jane, very nice woman, but remember that, Propane Jane?
Oh,
This
yeah.
was the business of installing propane tanks under vehicles to use it instead of regular fuel. The state had this incentive program and people went wild. It's like every Chevy Suburban had a propane tank underneath the back. And they weren't even using it. They got the rebate anyways and could still keep their vehicle guzzling gas. And the state was not prepared for that and did not have the money to pay the incentives. It was a total fiasco, total fiasco. And we're hearing that among opponents of vouchers. They're using that same language to describe it. 2 million people weren't around here 20 years ago. I'm not sure it's going to resonate, except among people like us who were and remember that. I think the answer to your question is people, just like with water, they're going to have to see this play out, right? And I'll add one thing that kind of got lost when Katie Hobbs, when her budget director, unveiled her proposed budget on Friday, which was that the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, which is an independent budget analyst, came to the same conclusion about the voucher program. It's going to be bleeding cash. And so they both kind of agree. I need to take a closer look at the JLBC numbers. But what I would point to is 2024, which could be a really interesting year for statewide votes. It's likely we're going to have a vote on reproductive rights, on abortion. Katie Hobbs doesn't believe she can get anything through this legislature on abortion, whether it's, you know, saving the life of the mother, you know, exception for incest. Doesn't think she can get that through. So the 15-week ban is what the state's going to have. And they're aiming for an initiative in 2024. The aggregate expenditure limit, the spending cap, that could go to an initiative in 2024. And could it be we'll have another ESA initiative in 2024 if all these fears prove to be correct and this does turn into a budget buster? One reason it might not is when the Joint Legislative Budget Committee did their analysis of the universal voucher expansion last spring, and they conceded a lot of information is not really available, but they said, you know what? Private schools don't have enough seats right now. They couldn't expand fast enough to absorb all the new students coming in. Now, it might be what we're going to see, and we may already be seeing it, just don't know it. A lot of private schools suddenly opening up and creating new places for potential voucher students to go. But right now, the number of seats, I thought they pegged it at about 52,000 total seats. I'd have to review that report, but not as many as you think. So is that enough to bust the budget? I don't know. I don't know the kind of math the governor's office is doing, but put that out there as one of the 3 potential ballot initiatives in 2024. Probably more, I'm sure.
Speaking of initiatives, as as Republicans struggle with the threat of a veto and, the policy initiatives that are very important to them that, suddenly now are going nowhere. How worried are you about them getting into the habit of sending things straight to the ballot themselves? And I mean, that's a big question in itself. But as a follow-up to that, do you think they're being smart about what that would mean for voter turnout, for instance, depending on the things that they refer?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything Republicans would refer. I think they have to realize that, we're not a red state. We're kind of purple, but a very unstable shade of purple, So there's that, but they have to realize that what voters heard from many of their candidates last fall didn't resonate. And yeah, some of these races were close, but there are reasons for that. That may not have to do with message, actually, but didn't resonate. And, if the Democrats had done a better job of organizing, they may have won one more seat in the House or the Senate. You might have had a tie in one of the chambers. And they know that. So they're kind of on the bleeding edge right here and have to decide what would we want to put to voters that would get them on our side. I'm not sure what that is right now. Is it maybe, I don't know, well, they have what they want with vouchers. I don't know what else they could do, but there are creative people out there who can think of things. That's possible, but I think what you're seeing in Washington and elsewhere is just a really hard look at the Republican agenda. And you have Kevin McCarthy, who today put, I think, one of the biggest liars we've ever seen in public life on two committees. I mean, are there no standards? The answer is no, there are no standards. But I think we knew that. So Republicans really have to watch where they're going right now and what the message they're sending to voters. And in particular, Republicans here, I'm not sure they're taking the right lesson from what just happened.
To that point, do you see any Republicans in particular being, kind of savvy enough to find things that they can agree with the governor on and delivering for their constituents? Or do you think we're so, I hate the word polarized, but we are polarized at the legislature? What do you think?
Yeah, I do. For example, I'll say one person I'm watching is Matt Gress. He's Governor Ducey's former budget director. He was elected in a swing district, the old LD 28, right, in North Central Phoenix, has been replaced by LD 4. That is a swing district, one Republican, one Democrat from the House, and Christine Marsh winning yet another tough election. My goodness, as their state senator. So 2 Democrats and 1 Republican representing that district. So he's got to think about his voters. He's got to look at the caucus around him. It was fascinating today seeing him, Governor Ducey's former budget director, questioning Katie Hobbs' former budget director about voucher program and Hobbs math. And it was a good discussion. He was asking very good questions. Politically showed some political savvy. I could see him, again, given the district he's from, given what he knows, and given where he aligns. It's tough now because if you're a Republican, I don't know, I'm not going to peg him. That's not fair. Yeah, to peg him. However, he does in running, you do have to kind of tip the cap to some people you might not otherwise want to be associated with. We'll see. He'll be tested by these votes on the board of truth, as they call it, right? Big board in the legislature, in the House and the Senate. It's the board of truth, yes or no. And so he might be one. You might see J.D. Mesnard or T.J. Shope in the Senate. Unclear to me that they have much tolerance for some folks around them. But you never know. Those are 3 to watch. There are probably more. Those J.D. Mesnard in particular, that's another potential swing district he's in. He's had some close races out there in the Senate. So he's got to think about his voters in a area that's really purple, right? That's where the suburban moms are. It's the purple loop that goes around the valley. It's where you find those voters.
So Bram, sticking with the governor just for a minute, do you have any, we didn't ask you about this in advance, but do you have any reaction to her cabinet appointments? They seem to be mainly uncontroversial. Technically, not technically, she has to get these appointments confirmed in the Senate. You know, historically, we haven't seen much mischief, but again, this is a new era. What do you think about that? Are we going to see wasted time on that kind of nonsense?
Yes. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's something that's overlooked. I mean, the Republican legislature has the power of lawsuits, subpoenas. I would not be surprised if somebody, Wendy Rogers, subpoenas the governor. And confirmation hearings, which we haven't thought about for years. I didn't even know they happened. But yes, the Senate has to confirm Governor Hobbs' nominees. Very interesting group that reflect her and her interests. Frankly, I thought, boy, she's going to have a hard time staffing up a cabinet. Democrats haven't been in power so long, and she's done it fairly quickly. And many of these cabinets have darn good resumes. You saw today, she just named a new public safety director, Jeff Glover, the former Tempe, well, still Tempe police chief, who I believe is the first African-American DPS director they ever had in 55 years, and a new director of prisons, which is the most thankless job in any government. So welcome, sir, because this might be, Arizona might be the most thankless job of all the thankless jobs. But yes, you're going to see confirmation battles. Imagine, if you will, what the confirmation of the new Department of Health Services director is going to look like as we're still in the midst of COVID. Imagine what that's going to look like. Okay, that's going to be a tough one. There will be other tough ones. DPS director, prisons director. So you have people who are going to be out to get a scalp. Now, I have not looked at the law. You probably know this better than I do, Jody, but they can serve for a year, I believe, and then the governor can make a recess appointment.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. Not the best way to do things, maybe not the job security they want, but that is a very likely scenario. We talked about this on Square Up a few weeks ago, and Rachel Leingang, who reports for the Arizona Agenda, it's on Substack. If you don't read it, you should, if you're interested in politics. She and Hank Stevenson, her partner, did a great outline of what confirmation is going to look like. So that's going to be very interesting. And you're going to see culture wars again. A lot of the stuff that you're seeing in bills will play out in confirmations.
Wow, we'll have to gear up for that. Now we have several amazing cleanup batters in the dugout here, Sivia Tumarkin being one and Anita Malik. So any further questions? I think we have Bram for 5 more minutes, so I'll throw it open.
Anything at all?
Sivia, you're muted.
Yeah, I unmuted. I'd like to ask what actions you think Katie Hobbs might take, even in terms of executive orders regarding immigration, because we're very involved as an organization in asylum seeker refugee assistance here, and direct assistance and policy. So do you think that she might take any executive action?
That's a question. That's a good question. I haven't thought about it at all. I know she's supposed to be rolling out executive orders, but it seems she stopped for some reason. She had a bunch of executive orders in the pipeline, and I think she only released about 5 or so. I don't know. I don't know. I suppose it's possible. I think I would say this, what we've seen from her is you know she's a former social worker when you look at her
Right.
appointments, when you look at her budget. And so I think definitely the social side of this, the caring side for undocumented immigrants, asylum seekers when they pass through Phoenix, and many pass through Phoenix and Arizona, not just at the border, but literally in Phoenix. I could maybe see her doing something like that to offer some more assistance. But I mentioned lawsuits earlier. That's one right there. You already have, if you didn't know it yet, we have a Freedom Caucus in our legislature this year for the first time. It's kind of like the baby Freedom Caucus. You have the adult Freedom Caucus in Congress, and we have our Freedom Caucus right now in Arizona. They've already threatened to sue over her woke agenda in executive orders. So that would be begging a lawsuit. But again, you know what? These may be fights she's willing to have.
Sure.
But it's kind of sure, I'll fight about this, bring it on. The first lawsuit they were threatening was over her order banning discrimination in state hiring. You're going to sue over that? Really? You think that's a winner? I mean, legally, I'm not sure it's a winner. Politically, so you support discrimination. I mean, it's just not a winner. We'll see.
It is not a winner. Any other questions for Bram while we've got him? Thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you.
Sylvia, you want to close us out?
I will. Again, thank you so much, Bram. There's so many questions. This is such a mystery session. A lot of fatuous bills being introduced, so many substantive issues that need to be addressed. So it will be very interesting to see how it plays out. But I would like to bring back Julie and Anita and Megan, our advocacy team here. And the big question is, how can all of you become involved? And as we have in the past, we will be encouraging RTS. We will do RTS training. Jody will be releasing weekly her rundown of bills that are coming up, so you know whether to give thumbs up or thumbs down. But I'm going to turn it over for a moment, if I might, to our advocacy team here.
Great. Thank you, Sylvia. Yes. So like Sylvia said, coming up, some of you that were at our brunch know that we were talking very specifically about where do we go from here. So thank you, Bram, for educating us on what we can expect. But the plan is, how do you get involved? With so many potential vetoes, where should we put our best efforts? Should it be those bills that we know are going to get vetoed later? No, likely not. And so we will be parsing through that for you. And like Sylvia said, RTS training, there will still be those bills that we do need to be vocal on and be very strongly vocal on those. So we'll continue with that. So keep an eye out for some of that from us. We'd love to hear from you about other issues. We know water is the big one that's on a lot of people's minds, but other issues that you want to hear about specifically in these meetings as well. And I don't know if Megan or Julie have anything else to add.
To steal a phrase from the TV world, stay tuned.
Exactly. I would like to add that in addition to our legislative task force, which we invite everybody to become a part of, you can email us at info@ncjwaz.org. You can contact Anita or Megan or Julie. You can, a few minutes, put your contact in the chat. If you would like to participate, we will be getting petition campaigns going, phone drives going, letters and meetings with legislators. So if you would like to be a part of this, please sign on. We also have a very aggressive and growing immigration task force. We not only provide services, we have baking, providing breakfast, and we provide Sunday meals for asylum seekers at the Welcome Center. but we are increasingly becoming involved in policy issues as well. So if you would like to participate in our immigration task force, please let us know. Our acting chair is Joy Rodino, and if you reach out to us, we will get you in touch with the team. And certainly our reproductive justice, reproductive freedom task force is as aggressive as ever. And we want to be sure that we are introducing and supporting bills that will help to provide over-the-counter contraceptive coverage, 12-month prescriptions for contraception. We are, of course, still working, as I said earlier, to reverse the fetal personhood law and to try to reverse or at least get the injunction on the reason ban because it is in conflict with the 15-week ban. These bills are not harmonious because one can determine that they want to terminate a pregnancy because of genetic testing that was done at 12 weeks. Within the 15-week legal boundary, they would be entitled to abort, but not for reason of genetic anomaly. And even though the prior Attorney General's office took a don't ask, don't tell position, well, you don't have to tell your doctor the reason. What the AG's office overlooked is that we have mandatory sonograms in this state. So a provider would look at the sonogram, possibly see a severe genetic anomaly, and know without being told the reason for this termination. So we are trying to work to still get these bans overturned or at least enjoined indefinitely, we hope. So with that, again, we invite you to become part of our advocacy efforts in the legislature, in the courts, with asylum seekers. We also hope to indeed focus on public education in partnership with Save Our Schools. We would like to counter the new Superintendent of Public Instruction's ban on what they claim, again, as Bram referred to, the woke teaching. We want to be sure that books are available to all the students in this state, that a rigorous, broad education is available for all the students in this state. And we have aspirations of working with Save Our Schools, of attending school board meetings, and trying to make a case for a liberal education. So please, again, this is participatory advocacy. We would like all of you to join us and to become involved. And I also want to remind you that our signature project is Ruth Place, the creation of a sexual violence trauma recovery center for survivors. And we welcome all of you who would like to participate in the development, in the fundraising, offer your support so that we can open the doors as soon as possible. And with that, again, thank you for being part of this program. Thank you for supporting NCJW Arizona. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. Good night.